I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Solve Climate by 2030 event here in the state of Wisconsin. My name is Scott Williams. I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The Wisconsin Energy Institute, we provide leadership on the UW-Madison campus for multidisciplinary research, education, and outreach efforts with the goal of accelerating the world's transition to clean and resilient energy systems and solutions. The Solve Climate by 2030 is a global initiative, and you can see a map here of all the different sites around the world that are hosting webinars today, with the goal of bringing climate change discussions to college and high school classrooms. And the focus is on state and local action that could make a major difference over the next decade to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. You can see, again, the dialogues in all 50 states and 50 plus places around the world that are taking place both this week and next week. And the Wisconsin Energy Institute is proud to host the dialogue for the state of Wisconsin, and we're very blessed to have such an esteemed and exciting group of panelists here to have this conversation. We encourage you to stay connected with the Wisconsin Energy Institute going forward, and we hope you'll attend our future events, such as our monthly Forward in Energy Forum, to learn more about the many elements of the transition to cleaner energy systems. Just a few announcements before we launch into today's conversation. First, we'd like to thank our promotional partners at UW-Madison, the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, the Office of Sustainability, and the La Follette School of Public Affairs. Also, a logistics note, we have automatic live captioning available. So you do have the option to turn that on by clicking on live transcript at the bottom of your screen. Next, I would like to acknowledge that the land that the Wisconsin Energy Institute occupies, as well as all of UW-Madison, is the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk people, who have called this land Dejok since time immemorial. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 First Nations residing in the boundaries of present-day Wisconsin remain vibrant and strong. We recognize and respect the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations that reside in the boundaries of the state of Wisconsin, and also want to acknowledge that tribal nations are doing some of the most important and leading work in transitioning towards clean and just energy systems. Before we turn it over to today's panelists, the Solve Climate by 2030 team has provided a short video that will provide some additional background behind this global initiative, as well as ways that you all can get involved in making climate a class. Give me one moment as we bring up the video.
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 U.S. states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the Graduate Programs in Sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the 2 hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon-neutral economy, while the U.S. rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinar's homework for the students and then afterwards have a one-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate project has easy-to-use teacher's guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes and thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forward, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Goodstein. One more logistics note before we begin the conversation. We encourage you to engage in the chat feature to introduce yourself and what brings you here today. If you do have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A box. And you also have the opportunity to upvote questions to have our moderator choose the questions that are most interesting to the attendees today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Professor Morgan Edwards to moderate our session. Dr. Edwards is an assistant professor of public affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research and teaching focus on human-centered energy responses to the climate crisis across policymaking scales. She draws on mixed quantitative and qualitative methods and combines large data sets and community knowledge with systems modeling to assess and track the multidimensional impacts of human energy use. So a great moderator to lead the discussion today. So welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And it's my great pleasure to introduce a fantastic panel of people who are all working on the ground to develop climate solutions here in Wisconsin. Mandela Barnes is Wisconsin's 45th Lieutenant Governor and the chair of the governor's task force on climate change. He was born and raised in Milwaukee, and before becoming Lieutenant Governor, he served 2 terms in the Wisconsin State Assembly. Stephanie Salgado is the co-founder of Wisconsin's Youth Climate Action Team and the youngest member of the governor's task force on climate change. She is currently studying environmental studies and political science here at UW-Madison. Dylan Jennings is the director of public information at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission and a former tribal council member for the Bad River Tribe. He is also an alumnus of UW-Madison, where he studied anthropology, American Indian Studies, and environmental studies. And finally, Seth Hoffmeister is the organizing and political director at Wisconsin Conservation Voters, where he works to ensure conservation champions are elected to state and local office across the state. He also serves as chair of the Green Bay Sustainability Commission. And so we're very excited to hear what our panelists have to say about the questions that are most pressing for you about the climate crisis. But to start the conversation and kick things off, I've asked the panelists to prepare remarks on two questions. First, what is one very important action that is needed in Wisconsin to advance green recovery, climate solutions, and just transitions? And two, what is one action that students and others in Wisconsin can take to help make this happen? And Lieutenant Governor, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be joined with some friends that I've had a chance to work with, some longer than others. But the fact is, I feel that we are getting serious finally about addressing the climate crisis and also becoming a leader. And I know that I was supposed to, I'm gonna get to the question. I'm not trying to use a political delay tactic here, but just wanted to thank the UW Energy Institute for hosting the Solve the Climate by 2030 event that's focused on a green recovery, that's focused on climate solutions and a just transition. Also want to make sure I recognize two task force members, Dylan and Stephanie, because they were integral to the work. You know, we released our task force report just a few months ago, and it was because of input from people like the two of them that got us to the place where we were able to put together such a comprehensive report. And I want to remind people too that when we came into office, Wisconsin was so far behind in dealing with the climate crisis. So in the first year, we took necessary action, which included joining the U.S. Climate Alliance. We also set new energy goals for the state. We created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, and then came the task force on climate change. And I'm incredibly proud to have led the work of the task force over the last year because we worked diligently to identify climate solutions that worked for Wisconsin, recognizing that the solutions aren't going to be the same in all 50 states, but all 50 states do need to act. The United States has to be a leader. And what we did was assembled a diverse coalition of people from all parts of the state, many different backgrounds, professions, and a lot of folks who haven't typically been at the table, although they are impacted by climate change or have been leading the state and the nation in finding solutions. And we want to make sure that the task force is also bipartisan, and it included people who didn't always agree with us. And I think that was important as well because post the report being published, it gave us an opportunity to talk about the fact that, you know, the things that were voted on, we were able to find some sort of common ground. And I know that can often be a dirty word. And I know that I have sometimes been very frustrated with some people, with like maybe not individuals who were on the task force, but certain interests who were on the task force, quite frankly. But it was important for us to have those conversations. It was important for us to put people in the room together who touched climate policy in one way or another, because that's how we'll get to, that'll be our best path to solutions. But after you're listening to experts holding public listening sessions and talking about the important issues like environmental justice, again, that report came out this past December with those 55 proposed solutions that span 9 different sectors that would benefit the health of our people and our economy, especially as we are still working on recovery, especially as we still are working to bounce back from the pandemic. And so I'm proud that the governor used the task force report as a guide as he built the 21 to 23 biennial budget, which just came out a few weeks ago. And I'm also proud to say that this budget makes historic investments in conservation and in clean energy, investments that will not only help protect and preserve the state's natural resources, but it can also provide economic opportunity for people across the state. And some of those budget items include creating a state office of environmental justice. It includes promoting resiliency through statewide flood resilience planning, the creation of a chief resilience officer at the state level, and also investing over $30 million in programs that help build resilient infrastructure, restoring wetlands, and also support for our farmers after his flooding events that we see occur more regularly than they had been before, and also providing $70 billion in annual bonding for the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund over the next 10 years. investing in green jobs and environmental conservation training programs to help us build a clean and just economy, and also building on our administration's work over the past 2 years related to clean drinking water and offering comprehensive proposals to ensure that every Wisconsinite has access. And the number one action I think that should be taken to address climate change, I think that to answer that is probably advancing a green recovery, a just transition, and addressing climate change in the next 10 years. The one action is going to be passing the climate agenda in our budget. It's tough to pick one thing, right? That our report had 55 recommendations, and we need legislative action. And I guess that would be the number one action, is legislative action. And this is the most ambitious climate agenda that our state has ever seen. And these are, again, the investments that are greatly needed as we continue to feel the costly impacts of climate change and the devastating impacts of the pandemic. But in order for us to see these things become reality, we need support from people to, contact their legislators. We proposed a budget, now it's in their hands. It is in the hands of the Joint Committee on Finance right now. We'll soon go to the full legislature. And we have to build a groundswell of support from the public to make sure that this becomes our reality. And that leads to the answer to the next question, because students can do so much to help this happen. Students can do this by being engaged in the budget process and demanding climate action from every level of government. Stephanie basically just showed up to my office one day with a bunch of people, with a bunch of students, and said we need to do something about it. And I said we were doing something, and they pretty much said it wasn't enough. And then she found herself on the climate change task force. So there are so many things that students can do. And some of this stuff, state budget processes, task forces, the work can be long, the work can seem boring on the outside, but this is how we turn our values into action. And this is how we fund our priorities. So I'm encouraging people to call their representatives, ask them to support the climate investments in the budget, and talk to your friends and family about doing the same thing. And I also want to encourage people to attend our budget listening sessions, particularly the one that will be focused on the environment, and that is April 21st at 6 p.m. And to find more information and other dates, you can go to evers.wi.gov and click the Connect tab. And we know that this is going to take all of us to make these proposals and this vision a reality for our state, but I am so sure that we can get this done if we not just commit ourselves, but make sure we do the organizing work to get other people committed, just as committed as we are.
Thank you. And that's a great point about following all of the processes behind getting these policies passed at the state level. Stephanie, the Lieutenant Governor mentioned you in his remarks. What about you? What's one action we can take in the state and one action that students can take to help make that happen?
Yes. First and foremost, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for summarizing all the whole complex process that it was to put out this, report. It wasn't easy. We all come together from different places. So we didn't have that dynamic that we had until now. And we haven't practiced, with our interests and what we wanted to move forward. But sooner or later, at least, we start that conversation. Now we have recommendations. We have proposals for actually, moving forward as a state and as a nation. I think we're a leader in that. More into that, I think we have to address the elephant in the room. One of the youngest members, for sure, in the committee. And for all the people who will be watching this, whether that is teachers or students, I am just like you. I'm 19-year-old, and I was a high school student at one point. And let me tell you that the reason why I believe so strongly why climate change should be a class is because what if we are not all on the same page? How can we understand an issue if we don't all understand the basic fundamentals of that issue? I do not believe this class should be to the extent, that will be harsh on, students' mental health. But I still do believe that in that classroom that you can learn so much about, destruction and what can come forward if we don't move forward as a nation and as a state. We can also find hope. We have to remain hope because we cannot be just letting the ball roll and see what happens. We have to take action. And so as a 19-year-old who is actually an immigrant from Honduras and at first was having trouble with English, I will tell you that an activist can take you far. So just as the Lieutenant Governor said, like contact your legislators, be out there, be loud, be taking up space, especially if your voice has been marginalized in the past. And so with the organization I co-founded with called Youth Climate Action Team here in Madison, Wisconsin, that's what we like promote, mobilizing young voices to really bring forward what their initiatives are and what they want to see forward in the representatives and all these ideas that they want to bring forward. You know, young people are just full of these ideas. And so one thing I will say that we have to address and I would want to see addressed with all this like climate policy would be social justice. So how are we going to have a conversation if not everybody is included at the table? Therefore, we have to address, you know, immigration. We have to address our racism nowadays in our society. All these are key elements to really understand each other, be empathetic towards one another. Lastly, I just want to like promote and, you know, give out a shout out to that report because that report took a long time, took a lot of people's like energy and time, just like put it together. And it was so nice looking. I was in love. I had to order 3 copies of it. But more so, there is a possibility, no matter how young you are, to get involved and to actually find a solution towards this big problem that is multifaceted, that is, you know, has many issues and layers that we still can address nowadays.
Yeah, those are such great points, especially around the connections between climate justice and so many other aspects of social and racial justice that are important to address in our state. Dylan, how about you?
Aniga kinauia, nitsa Bizhikiins, indigenous cause, wabashashi and Doda, Mashkazibing and Dunjaba, Nimiguchuenda, Makinagogino, Agapi Jaigoma, Sonungum, Niwijaganashi, Bangi. So good evening, everybody. In our beautiful descriptive Ojibwe language, I just answered the questions and told you how to solve the climate crisis. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I want to also acknowledge everybody here tonight. I really do appreciate everybody coming here and being a part of this. So miigwech to all you beautiful people that are here tonight. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be here, and that speaks volumes. And also, you know, miigwech to, you know, our relative here, Stephanie, for her kind words about our young people. Because as I was thinking about a lot of this, you know, and also what Lieutenant Governor was talking about, I think about our young people a lot too, you know, and you know, I'm really appreciative to Stephanie for serving on the committee as well. And one thing that I've also recognized is that we sit in meetings every single day. And I'm sure everyone can relate. Nowadays, we sit in probably more meetings than we've ever sat in because people have figured out these virtual platforms, right? And so rather than schedule meetings well in advance, everyone's like, let's just jump on Zoom or let's just jump on these virtual platforms. But what I'm trying to say is very rarely do we actually listen to our young people, right? Young people are never at the table when we have these important discussions, which is really backwards, right? Because young people are the ones that ultimately inherit all of these problems and issues, right? And so I really thought that was really wise and smart to have some of that representation on the task force, and I couldn't have thought of a better individual to help fill some of those roles there. You know, and I also got to say too that you know, just like the Lieutenant Governor was talking about in ECHO, you know, in general, the task force recommendations are a really great start, and I think that the task force recognized that, you know, right off the bat, that even assembling this group and starting these conversations was a step in the right direction. But, you know, we're very much, you know, part of a really long-term solution and strategy, right? We're simply, you know, pushing the boulder uphill, you know, as some would say. And, you know, hey, some might argue too that, you know, in some communities and some states across the nation, that boulder is just sitting there, right, and still waiting for people to take on that battle. And so, you know, a good starting point is to put all those recommendations within that document, you know, into play. And there were a lot of other recommendations that weren't recognized quite yet, just because, you know, it's a starting point. And so pushing through that and you know, picking some of those other ones up and garnering the support that they need to get to the the effective state to make some of that change is going to be huge over the next few years. I also got to say too that oftentimes these kinds of issues, like Lieutenant Governor had said, become really partisan-y, if that's a word, right? And but it shouldn't be that way, right? Because climate change isn't a partisan thing. It's a human issue, right? We all are impacted in some way, shape, or form, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. And I can't reiterate enough how a lot of our communities, especially our indigenous communities and minority communities, are disproportionately impacted by climate change. Me living in northern Wisconsin here, we see those impacts on a daily basis when we're harvesting, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I got to say too, our young people, as far as adopting solutions and figuring out ways forward, I really challenge everyone to become adept and educate yourself on the problems within our region, but also challenge our education systems, right, that you're currently in. Push your schools to reform how we look at climate change, right? Climate change should be embedded in everything that we do within our education, within the realm that we come from. And so those are things in the in the immediate future that we can take steps to address, right, within our own realms, I would say. So that's all I have to say for now. Miigwech.
Such great points, and they really get to the heart of one of the goals of this event, which is to think about how we can bring climate change into education across all subjects in high school and university. Seth, how about you? What's one action we can take in Wisconsin and one action that students and other people can take to help make that happen?
Yeah, great. Love this question. But first off, just thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Really excited to talk about this. And yeah, I guess when I think about one single action that students, young folks, or older folks, or anybody can take, it might be a little bit of a cop-out because it's something that we need to always be doing. And I think the Lieutenant Governor mentioned this a little bit, but we need to engage in our democracy at every single level, before elections, on elections, and after elections. When we talk about all of the things that need to happen, big and small, to address climate change, it's going to take local government, it's going to take state government, it's going to take the federal government, and it's really going to take global agreements to do that. The power of our vote is so sacred and so powerful. And when we think about all the different ways to address climate change, it starts at the ballot box. And I think one thing that we've learned at Wisconsin Conservation Voters in the previous governor's administration or the previous president's administration is it's really hard to get things to happen at the scale they need to. But when we scale things down and look at the problems and the potential solutions in our own communities, the power is really potential, or the potential is really powerful, rather. I think one thing that we all can do is talk to our local elected officials. I think that we can ask them, like for me, I live in the city of Green Bay, what they're doing to address climate change at the local community. A few years ago, we started that conversation, and the answer was they weren't doing anything. And we said, well, can we create a citizen commission to start working on that? And they said, sure, but you're going to have to be on it. So I've just been able to sit on this commission with a lot of wonderful folks in the city of Green Bay, and to start to think about how we can rethink everything from our stormwater infrastructure to where we get our electricity, to the percentage of tree canopies covering the city, all sorts of things that can do that. And then, of course, we have great leadership and Lieutenant Governor Barnes and Governor Evers and some, not all folks in the legislature who are really pushing hard. And last week, we saw President Biden unveil a very ambitious climate infrastructure package. And it's really going to take all levels of government pushing and supporting each other to do that. And I think what we can do, young and old, is just make sure that the folks we're electing to school boards, to presidents, to council members, is that they're addressing climate and they're taking it seriously. And I think what we can do beyond that too is to talk to our friends and to talk to our families, post on social medias, talk to folks, you know, after this pandemic, when it's safe to talk in public, have these conversations about why voting is important to us and why we think that these solutions should be front and center, especially when we have limited resources to do things. I think we're seeing just how powerful our vote really is. The attacks on our democracy that are happening all across the country, because a lot of really great folks won elections last year, are the result of folks who don't want to act on climate, trying to take away that power. It's happening here in Green Bay, where they're challenging a really great election. We saw the worst case scenario happen in Georgia. And I think when we see attacks on our democracy, we really need to realize that that's an attack on our ability to address climate change, and our right to vote is even more important. So we just had an election yesterday in Wisconsin, and for better or worse, I feel like we're always in election mode. We've got another big election coming up in April 2022, another big one in November 2022, and we got to make sure that all the folks running for office are prioritizing climate, and after they're elected, that they're doing everything they can, and we're helping them and we're pushing them, and we're moving the ball yard by yard. So yeah, I think that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your remarks. And we have a question here from Matt that I think really gets at the core of some of the things that we're thinking around climate justice and just transitions. And so Matt says, according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, the energy burden for Black households in Milwaukee is the 6th highest of any city in the USA. And that was in 2016. How do we make sure that a transition to renewable energy doesn't further burden those already impacted by our current energy system?
One of the things that was in the report was making it more affordable for households, for lower income households, to be able to access clean, renewable forms of energy. There are a lot of people who would love to make that transition, but it's cost prohibitive. And the fact is, I guess I'll add another part to even that question, is the fact that, you know, I got involved in this work because of one of my old jobs where we were part of the Cleaner Valley Coalition, and they were challenging a utility provider, not even gonna say names, but as a utility provider, coal burning power plants, toxins spewing into lower income Black and brown neighborhoods, and people had enough of it. And so they took them to court as part of a large coalition of people. So not only is there that cost burden, there's also the direct environmental impact, where young children are growing up with respiratory illnesses and at disproportionate rates. So there's so many reasons why we need to make it affordable, cost just being one of them itself, but also just the less reliance on fossil fuels. Now I'm happy because the bigger utilities are moving towards. Obviously, we want them to move faster. We want to see this happen in a just way, and we want to see unnecessary costs being taken out of the mix, because I have seen a number of situations from a number of other utility providers. I won't say names. I'm a customer with 2 different utilities, and I've seen it happen where you'll see clean energy being pitched as a way to get energy for your home, but there's another cost associated. It's like, for an additional $4 a month, you can get your energy from renewable sources, which we all want to do, which we should want to do. But that extra $4 can mean a whole lot. Can mean lights on or lights off for somebody. So it's important for us to continue to promote methods that would make renewable energy more affordable for people, like on-bill financing, for instance. That could help people who want to have their own solar projects at home.
Anyone else have thoughts on Matt's question?
I'll just add something real quick. I'll just state that this is no level like I am an expert at this and I can definitely speak up about the solution. However, I can definitely state that if we're so concerned about how our implementations of things that we want to propose are going to affect marginalized people, then we have to talk to those same marginalized people and how they think it would be best implemented for them, how they think this will be executed perfectly or in the best manners to address, the issue. I think this is something often forgotten or just like checked in the box, like we talk to the community. However, we actually have to engage with the community and bring the community together and actually follow up with the community afterwards. Is this going correctly? Is this going good? Is this, actually doing what you needed it to be doing?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that too. As a fellow task force member, I was really proud that that was something that was at the forefront of everything we did. And thanks to Lieutenant Governor bringing that up early on in the process, was how do we make sure every recommendation meets all of the equitable needs that we have across this really diverse state, right? That we didn't just sit down and just throw out ideas and then, oh, that sounds great, we'll just put that in there. It was a daunting task to go through every recommendation and thoroughly try to review as best as we can, return to our constituents and come back to the table and figure out how each of those recommendations impacts marginalized communities in some way, shape, or form. And speaking from our community, we're one of the poorest counties, part of one of the poorest counties in the state, right? And so the notion of utilizing renewable energy is absolutely great, like Stephanie was saying. I think everybody would love to if they could, but the practicality and reality of it is that cost and the actual ability for some of our people to carry that out is unrealistic, right? And so a lot of these recommendations had to come with certain caveats that identified that, well, if that's the case, then we need to figure out how to levy funds, to be able to address some of the rural community needs, right? Or address some of the tribal community needs. Our tribal community has really been lucky in leveraging a lot of federal funds to be able to initiate solar projects and whatnot. And how do we how do we potentially support some of those initiatives that are already ongoing that to kind of further the mission of the of our state here. So definitely a lot of things that we had to grapple with and think about, and definitely things that we're continuing to figure out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like the only thing I'll add, definitely like agree with what's been said. I mean, when we think about climate change, whether it's happening at the global or the neighborhood level, the folks that are already the most marginalized and most impacted outside of the impacts of climate change, that's just exacerbated by it. So when we talk about community solutions, if we're not addressing those inequities in the climate solutions, I don't really think they are climate solutions. I think at the city level, I think about the East River in my neighborhood. It's it's lower income areas. It's folks that are already experiencing a lot of hardship. That's where we need to start. And we not only need to address those issues, but the folks that are closest to the problem are going to have the best solutions that are going to allow us to move forward on this. I think I get so excited about the jobs potential, the economic potential of investing in clean energy jobs. I mean, that's another opportunity to just provide opportunity to folks that didn't have it in the first place. So
that actually segues right into a question that John had about the jobs outlook and clean energy jobs in the state of Wisconsin. So are there any specific policies that we might look to and other actions to create clean energy jobs in our state?
All right, well, guess I'll take it. I can say that the way that I've always talked about this is the fact that Wisconsin is missing out. We don't have a whole bunch of jobs in fossil fuels. We don't have mining jobs. We don't have oil drilling jobs. And we do have sun. And as hard as a case as that is to make sometimes, there is sun and there is solar energy. There is so much untapped potential. And I want to say, like in 2017, like job growth in the renewable energy sector and wind alone was like 17%. It was like 25% in solar. I think that these are incredible opportunities that we can still take advantage of here in Wisconsin. I'll also say that we were on the forefront of this work prior to 2011, but over the course of those 8 years, we fell behind. And when I think about the emerging crises that we're facing, one where we're trying to dig ourselves out of the economic realities of the pandemic, but there's also the crisis that's long existed in rural communities where so many of our family farms are filing for bankruptcy. I mean, we have a chance to increase revenue streams for our family farmers with carbon capture and sequestration. We have a chance to really up the ante when it comes to solar and wind farms. I mean, the potential is basically limitless. And also to connect the dots back to more urban parts of the state. I mean, in our climate change task force report, there's a pilot program for conservation work for green jobs that will be again piloted in Milwaukee with the hopes of expanding it to other places in the state.
Anyone else? Of Seth.
Yeah, I mean, when we started doing some of our local clean energy work, I had the opportunity to tour the Energy Center at Northeast Wisconsin Technical College. It's just like one of the most impressive education facilities when it comes to clean energy that I've ever seen. I think it's one of the top ones in the state. And we started talking about some of the goals that we had for the city, how we wanted to get the county, how we had this regional and statewide vision for clean energy goals. And to them, the educators, it seemed so great because when folks graduate with these clean energy technician degrees, they don't end up moving to east side of Green Bay to be my neighbors. They have to go out of state. They go to Iowa where the wind is booming. They go to other places that are actually investing in it. I mean, I think if we talk about, there are just a lot of other issues with young folks leaving Wisconsin for better opportunities. I think if we're able to build a 21st century energy infrastructure, folks that are educated here are going to be able to stay, and it's just going to make our communities so much better.
Yeah, I think I would also just chime in and piggyback off some of the things that were already talked about. I had to learn a lot about Wisconsin's agricultural practices while being on the task force, and that was really awesome to get to work with farmers and other agricultural experts that have very similar concerns, right? And it was really awesome to learn about a lot of the carbon sequestration work that and incentives that there could be in the event that farmers or agricultural specialists choose to utilize certain like no-till practices that eventually sequester more carbon. And so I think there are definitely a lot of opportunities in that realm just alone, right, with carbon sequestration to potentially create jobs and create revenue. But I'll also say too, a lot of jobs out there these days in this realm are in existence, right? Diego, what are you doing? Sorry about that. A lot of these jobs are already out there, right? So there's not a lot of reinventing the wheel. We can learn from other states and other areas and communities that are already plunging forward in these realms, and I think that's a very easy solution. Furthermore, I think we also recognize that taking this kind of plunge is a big commitment, right? And it can be scary. And I think that's what prohibits and inhibits a lot of people and a lot of states and governments from, taking that proverbial dive, right? And taking that jump, and a lot of it is we won't ever know, how that might pan out, economy wise until we actually take that leap. But what I will say is, as we wait longer to take that jump, that drop off is going to just continually get higher and further down, right? And it's for our own sakes, for our future generations' sakes, somebody's got to take that leap.
So both your comments and the Lieutenant Governor's touch on the agricultural sector. And we have a question here from Valerie about that, asking in particular, are there any policies or what kinds of policies are you looking to think about sequestering carbon in our agricultural lands? Are there particular policies in other states you're thinking about or other initiatives that we could adopt in this sector?
Is this on me again? I'll say though, this is another issue where we don't have to, like Dylan said, reinvent the wheel. I mean, there are models that are out there for us to use, and it's helpful too. Like Dylan also mentioned, no-till agriculture is not just beneficial to the environment; it's beneficial to the farmer. I had a chance to visit a no-till farm, and I mean, this guy's basically an evangelist, going around to other people in his community about, and talking about the benefits. And he's also mentioned examples of where there was a flooding event and he was all right and his neighbors weren't. So I think that any opportunity that we can have to be able to promote carbon sequestration or other methods and means for farmers to generate another source of revenue, I'm all for whatever that may be, and we do have specific ways outlined in the report.
May I jump in? This question, when it was first asked, I thought it meant to at the individual level. To be honest, even though systematic change is always welcome, especially with an issue about climate change. However, it's incredible how much we can actually save in like water and energy and miles, like travel in our food when we eat meatless, or when we just decrease our the consumption of meat. It's incredible, and just like each step that you take, it's incredible to like bring you more closer to like realizing how much your carbon footprint actually affects other people, affects the community that you live in. And on top of that, agriculture is such a complex industry that has to be reapproached, as the Lieutenant Governor said, has to be reapproached into remaking the whole process from the ground up. It has to be inviting and allowing farmers to take these chances to actually implement drip irrigation, to actually be able to do more polyculture and not just a monoculture of practices. And I just think this is very welcoming within the report in itself, because we have people, as Dylan mentioned, bring forward about their techniques and what they do and how they practice sustainable farming, which is again incredible what people are doing out of their own energy and their own time to bring light to this problem that not a lot of people think about.
We have a question here from Leah, more on a personal note, asking how you stay hopeful about fighting climate change. Any words of wisdom or encouragement for current high school and college students who are trying to tackle the climate crisis? And maybe a little bit about how each of you, you're all involved in this fight in very different ways. And so how you found your place within the broader search for climate solutions.
You want me to go first for the first time?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I got you, Mandela. I think without saying a whole lot, pace yourself. This is a marathon, and it's an issue that our children, our children's children, and future generations will continue to grapple with. And you can really get lost in the whole the whole realm of trying to solve all of these problems, right? And there are so many, and the problem itself we all know it's global, right? And oftentimes our frustrations, hit the road when, when we run into some of these roadblocks, when this becomes a political issue, right? When we realize it to be a human issue that we're all encountering. And so definitely pace yourself, make sure, mental health was talked about earlier, and I can't stress that enough. Making sure that, if you're a leader in this realm, you got to know how to take good care of yourself, your mind, body, spirit, because it's a marathon, right? And we're constantly fighting this every day. And coming from a marginalized community myself, like I said, we see these impacts every day when we're out harvesting, when we're practicing our cultural way of life. And it's scary, right? It's scary to me to think that some of these practices might not be here in the next 10, 20 years, right? For my children and grandchildren to partake in. And so can't stress that enough, pace yourself. And, just to also note too, that in my experience, I'm, somewhat of a young person yet too, still in my 20s, but, sometimes when you stand up to corporations, or when you speak up about climate change or about the environment, you're automatically seen or labeled as an activist, right? In my eyes, we're not. We're human beings that enjoy clean water, clean air, and we want the best for our future generations, right? That's what we are. And to recognize that it's a human thing, and we work together for these issues, and we're not lost in that translation, and we're not labeled things that ultimately we really aren't. We're just people that care for our environment, people that love our people.
Jumping right off from what Dylan said, this question, this question always caught me off guard. I have a response for almost every question, but this question is the one I struggle the most. And if I want to, reclaim the word of practicing on myself or working on myself through my mental health, I will definitely have to be honest. I have a therapist myself because I am naturally very anxious about the environment. I constantly think of future scenarios and what could I be doing. And as Dylan said, I am labeled as an activist. I am labeled as sometimes even a radical. And to be honest with you, as someone from a third world country, Honduras specifically, it's just like my background. This is our scenery, and this could be gone, white. And the people that are not even contributing the most to this issue is going to be affected the most. So we cannot be selfish enough and stand alone and be saying that we cannot do anything about it. It's too big of a problem. We cannot address it. It's my people, it's marginalized people, it's eventually the effects that will be coming towards us. So as someone who tries to be very bright and bright in the sense of positive, I will definitely know that young students and especially college students, do not let that turn you down. Do not let that dim your light. Continue your fight, especially no matter what people tell you, no matter what situations you're found in. If you're passionate about this issue because you care about the family that you have, because you care about drinking water, because you care about future generations, my generation, our generation, you can continue this fight. Just seek out for help. Just as Dylan said, pace yourself. Take care of yourself as you're doing this work.
I guess I'm most hopeful to, piggyback off Stephanie. I mean, her words specifically, and the fact that they come from her, from someone who's so much younger than me, and people get it, and that's important. And young people are stepping up with an enthusiasm that should be matched by their elder counterparts. Unfortunately, that's not the case across the board, but it's good that it is happening, and young people are forcing some much needed conversations.
Yeah, I think what keeps me hopeful, I definitely have my days and definitely have my weeks where it's hard, and it's you don't see a lot of progress. You feel like you're beating your head against the wall. The other side seems stronger, but then those moments are always fleeting. There's events like this where we're hearing about all sorts of great work happening. There's just progress at every level. There's hard work paying off. There's local governments taking matters into their own hands. There's new leadership at the state. There's a return to science at the federal level. The ebbs and flows, but the progress seems to be going in the right direction. It's just the work of so many people stepping up to do really kick-ass things that really keep me going. But I think you all kind of touched on it. Dylan, you said this. We're running a marathon. It's a long game here, and I think like the biggest lesson I've had to learn for myself is that it's okay to step back and take a break. I'm fully confident that we're going to meet the challenges of climate change and we're going to beat this issue. But when we think about it in the shorter term, if we take a little bit of a step back and take care of ourselves, when we come back, the work is still going to be there. We might be a little bit farther ahead, but when we take care of ourselves and take a break when we need to, we can really be in it for the long game. I think like the one good thing that has come out of the last year is it got me outside a lot more than previous years. I've always been a big outdoors person, but taking a hike in the woods and just remembering why we do this work in the first place for me is really energizing. But I'm hopeful because I know we're gonna win.
And so a couple of you mentioned the voices of young people as being one source of hope in thinking about solutions to the climate crisis. And Michaela has a question here that gets at this as well. So what are your thoughts on how we can elevate the voices and initiatives of young climate leaders in Wisconsin and use those to support both our communities and initiatives statewide?
Stephanie.
You see me like computing my my answer in my head. Oh my God, I've always been someone who expresses their emotions too much through their facial expression. But to answer that question, quite honestly, it has taken many layers, to be honest, to get to the point where I'm at, and so to amplify, to uplift, and to mobilize young people's voices is always going to be a hard journey. People don't always take young people as experienced. People don't always take young people as serious. People don't always, not always, but could be seeing young people as too optimistic. It's just too good to be true. You have to let down your expectations, but little did you know that your drive and your fire within you is actually the one driving you to the point where you have to scream outside of the lieutenant governor's office and demand for change, and change has to be initiated. And we're truly thankful about that. And so as a young person, I am involved in my university's Wisconsin Student Climate Action Coalition. And within them, we promote events within already orgs within the university to, bring some more people being involved in the conversation and the actions that we have. Through YCAT, we have people from all around the state who are high schoolers, making protests, making their first marches, and creating this events where people can bring forward their concerns about climate change, how truly concerned they want to be, showing those concerns to their representatives, for at them as constituents. So once again, I invite young people to let out your voice and, start contacting your representatives, call them, email them, let them know that you care about an issue, and actually exercise your vote. Exercise your right to vote is so essential. Local elections and national one, because at the end, when you're an informed citizen, when you're actually an advocate, when you're actually being out there on the streets, you're actually being listened to. So one cannot complain then of things that are affecting them if they didn't take the initiative to go and change them.
No, you didn't have to yell outside of the office. We invited you inside to yell. point of clarification. But I just think that this space, it lends itself to involvement from young people, because this is literally your future, my future too. I'm not that old now. But young people especially, I think it's important to know that the work that we're doing is with your future in mind. And I think that whether you're talking to your parents or your lawmakers, these are the conversations that have to be had. If you truly care about the next generation, you'll do something to address climate change. And that goes for people, like I said, whose parents may be on the fence. And even if their parents aren't on the fence, even if their parents do understand that climate change is a real issue, and this is for people who are too young to vote, making sure that your parents make informed decisions and don't vote for people who are going to throw your future away.
I agree with everything that's been said too. I think further, just continuing to give our young people a platform, involving them in existing committees, or even creating new platforms for them to meet and to talk about these issues, and to receive the resources that they need to help. Right. That's one of the worst things we can do as a society is shut out our younger generations and pretend like we know what's best for them, right? I think in general, we also need to do a better job of supporting them and creating, the spaces and opportunities for them to return to our communities, right? To do the meaningful work. Oftentimes we often hear, go get your education and come back and work for your community. And then, there's probably, and I can't say this definitively, but not often are there jobs there for these individuals to come back to do the meaningful work that they want to set out to do, right? So we got to be intentional and make those places and spaces for our younger generations. And I think, lastly, this is no offense to any politicians anywhere out there in the United States, but we have this weird history in the United States of some politicians staying in office for a really, really long time, right? Like, and some are okay in there, some maybe not so good, but we need to make places for younger faces in leadership, right? I was elected here in my community at the age of 23, right? So I think I was one of the youngest ones to be elected in my community on our tribal council and our tribal governing board. And at the time, it was a little bit unheard of, right? Like, and I never thought of myself as knowing anything, right? But and I learned so much from that experience. But that having those newer perspectives, and kind of the new age thinking and the ability to problem solve in different ways, rather than sometimes there's old. This is obviously old rhetoric, but kind of the old school way of doing things, right, might not always be the best fit. And so we got to allow our younger generations to work themselves into some of our political realms, and we need to nurture them, right? Not just like death by fire, set your foot in and swim or sink. Like we gotta nurture them and train them up, right? And work towards bringing up our next generation of leadership.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say that hasn't already been said. I mean, I feel like in my experience organizing or working anywhere across the state on climate or any other issues, it's really the young folks that often have the best ideas. And there's we haven't been conditioned to think that we can't do it. I mean, when we look at the single goal of solving or addressing climate change, it seems huge, but there's this audacity that says we can. And we have interns and fellows and high schools and colleges and young folks that are really crucial to our work. And I think going back to the last question, like, where do I get hope? It's in spaces like that. And I think too, like folks, younger folks that might be a little bit farther right on the political spectrum, for them, it's not a partisan issue. There's an acceptance of science, of the need to act on climate change that exists for more conservative folks that are younger. That doesn't really exist when you get a little bit older. So I think we gotta listen to young folks and lift up those voices.
So we have a fun question here from Danish. If you were designing a new stimulus package, so you had $1 trillion to spend on green infrastructure, how would you distribute this funding and what would you prioritize?
You want me to go again first?
Go for it.
Okay. One thing that I'm really passionate about that we've, some of it made it into some of the recommendations. It's not necessarily infrastructure, but, more or less capacity building. I'm a big advocate for our people reclaiming their sovereign abilities to initiate and better understand our food systems, right? And so when we understand our food systems, we understand the role that we play in all these intricate webs that we're involved in. We're also more adept to what's really going on, and we're also adept to those impacts, right? And so the more that you can understand your food systems locally, or even push to grow your own food, harvest your own food, and understand those systems that you operate within, the less impacts, but also the less impacts overall that we're having agriculturally, right? And it can go a long ways if it's a bigger movement. A lot of our tribal nations have been screaming food sovereignty as a strong solution for decades, right? And so, I can't preach that enough. Like, if we had funding, that might look like more, more community gardens, sessions, more community, education, as far as harvesting and, kind of being practitioners of, some of our traditional harvesting practices in general. I'll never forget one of our elders always said that up here is, our greatest grocery store and greatest pharmacy is right in our backyard, right here in the woods, right? And I believe that 100%, that we're, nowadays as a society, we're so far removed from our environment at times that we forget that everything that we potentially survived on hundreds of years ago is still right here in our yards, growing in the ground or out in our woods. And so, we really need to think about our food sovereignty in general, right? As a long-term solution to addressing some of those things, everything from food shortages to, how we're going to maintain those systems that are already struggling to maintain capacity. So that's where I would put money into. Especially, we saw the pandemic create a lot of scare in our shopping markets, in our stores, right? And I don't have a solution for toilet paper going out of commission, but just in general, though, it for us, we spend that time out in the woods, spend time getting to know our environment and figuring out our food systems.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up with the food systems piece, I think that, even if it's not people growing their own food, making sure that we are doing better as far as locally sourced food, making sure that we are shifting the balance from these large corporate factory farms back to sustainable family farms, local agriculture. I mean, these big corporate operations are doing a whole lot of damage to the environment, and they also aren't necessarily providing the same quality content like our local agriculture operations. Then we would have free public transportation. I think we would have high-speed rail connecting us across the country as well, and we would probably get to 100% clean energy in the next 5 years if we were to do $1 trillion specifically on green infrastructure. And not to mention all the jobs that come along with making that happen. We would, another thing, we'll retrofit all of our public buildings too. I mean, I think that's an incredible opportunity for us. Like our public spaces, and even here in the state, we have a lot of wonderful architecture. It's not necessarily the most energy efficient, these spaces, but we can preserve these works of art, and we can update them and keep them around for future generations without having to think about the environmental toll that they take.
Yeah, and it would be great to hear from the audience members in the chat too, what you might spend this money on, if you were prioritizing how we invest the stimulus in green infrastructure. Seth?
Yeah, well, I think one of the really good things we could do to help address climate change, I mean, if President Biden forgives student debt, I mean, young folks are going to be able to put solar on their house, to weatherize their house. So I think that's a really great indirect solution. In my work with the city of Green Bay and with other municipal governments that are trying to start these conversations, it's always the initial cost, whether we're talking about installing, community solar or energy efficient vehicles, or like Lieutenant Governor said, retrofitting our buildings. It's the initial cost that is really prohibitive. So I think money specifically for local governments to help with that. And, we really need to be constructing our physical environments in ways that are going to deal with the effects already of climate change. So updating our stormwater utilities, making sure that when we have extreme weather events, that can be handled. And that's, the code audits, the planning, all the development is really costly. And then, we're already seeing a lot of communities do some really great planning. Dane County, Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, the Eau Claire area, La Crosse are all in different phases of the conversation around how to unite business and industry and education and healthcare and residents and government to do that. But that, that costs money, even the planning. So resources for local government to do that, and money for accessible public education for the job fields of the future, I think would go pretty far.
I think I'll jump in with my answer for this question. It's really hard, to prioritize one thing. However, I will definitely say that, as I agree with what the panelists have said so far about investing in food system, investing in education, investing in green jobs, especially transitioning to green jobs, I would invest equally as much in education, just because, as I said earlier, like, we need everybody to be on the same page to really understand what we're trying to tackle at. And so that would include, a basis for students then to know how to really understand climate change, then really do those community gardens, and then take those practices and skills at home so they can practice them with their family. And the more, we are united and we can understand each other through these practices, the better as a society we can then tackle bigger ideas and bigger, like, social injustices, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, those are all great ideas, and we're seeing lots of great ideas come in the chat as well. So I know we're coming up on 8:15 now, and so I want to say a big thank you to all the panelists and everyone in the audience, and also to the Wisconsin Energy Institute for hosting this event. And we're all looking forward to continuing this conversation on what we can do at the state and local level to help solve climate change.
Thanks, Morgan. And as we wrap things up, if you all, in addition to what you'd spend your money on, if you want to type in the chat box of, if we're well on our way to solving climate in Wisconsin by 2030, what would your vision be? How would things look different? So feel free to share that in the chat box as we wrap up. We also have a brief survey as you close out, and you'll get an email reminder for that to help us inform us about our future events. And want to thank my cat Lily for making her usual appearance in these meetings. Feel free to go to energy.wis.edu and energy.wis.edu for upcoming /events for upcoming events. For more information on the Solve Climate by 2030 program, you can go to solveclimateby2030.org. There's resources for teachers for things like classroom discussions as a follow-up. And just in general, we hope that you are all inspired by the conversation that we had today to take action and help us create a more sustainable and just planet. So I want to thank all of our panelists, thank our moderator for the conversation that you provided today is really inspiring. And I hope you all can take something away from this event. So feel free to stay engaged with us. We've got, if you want to contact us for any follow-up, feel free to send questions to outreach@energy.wis.edu. And we will hope to see you soon at our future events. Thanks, everyone.